Name's Isaac Esch. It's been a few years now, but I'm doing fine in Pittsburgh, for the most part. Had a couple former Amish get in touch with me after hearing about it on the news. They really helped me out, even got me a job here working at the steel mill. Do I regret what happened? Of course. I still feel awful with what happened to Rebecca, and the others. But besides that, I don't really know yet. Yeah, it's been tough having to readjust. I have days where I wish I was back home, the comfort of what family I had, in our isolated existence. But I also reflect on how much I've become. It showed me a lot when my family, my parents, my community, just tossed me out, shunned me. It's hard, the only way you've known, when the people you love cut you off. I've come to terms with it for the most part, but I understand, knowing their mindset. We lived in a super strict community, old order Amish, no TV. We had to do everything the old-fashioned way on the farm. They wouldn't even let us have buttons. It was considered a sign of vanity. They valued the simple way of living, but in reality, they made it far more difficult than it had to be. Elam and Abigail were my parents, not my real parents. I was adopted into that way of life around age 5. It was always a factor in the family dynamic. I mean, I had black hair among a family that all had the standard blonde or brown-haired look. I always felt like an outsider, but also held to higher expectations. More rules being the bishop's son, his only son, after his natural-born sons had passed in a car accident. It was like I was the replacement son, and it just never took, and I resented them for that. So when 16 came, it had been brewing in me to rebel, and I wasn't the only one. That year, a group of us had turned 16, Sarah, Hannah, and I, and we were all looking forward to Rumspringa. When you see people at the market dressed different, using cell phones and cars. I remember the countless nights our family would be driving home in our horse and buggy, and I'd just stare at the houses we passed, seeing the lights on in their homes, wondering what it was like to sleep with the AC on in hot summer nights. We were young, and it was supposed to be fun during that time, really the only time to go nuts. You wouldn't get in trouble. It was a rite of passage. We weren't held to the ordnung, the order, the church's strict rules during that time, and I guess we took it too far. We did take it too far, and I don't blame anyone but myself, really. I knew if they found out, I'd be excommunicated, and in a way, I was hoping for that, but I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Believe it or not, I got that book to see if any of it was real. God, the devil. I think deep down, we all had a fear that maybe it would work, but I didn't think that it would ever end up the way it did that night. None of us did. I became pretty good friends with Robbie the year before. He was in English, or an outsider of the community. We were both in a blacksmith apprenticeship at the local technical school. I think we gravitated towards each other being rebels. He introduced me to modern day stuff. He also had a car and everything, so some days we'd skip class and go smoke, or go bowling and whatnot. I knew the Yoder family. My sister Rebecca worked with Sarah and Hannah down at the market sometimes. I knew them well enough, but we weren't close or anything, until they saw me at the market the one day, in English clothes, normal clothes. I knew Rebecca wasn't at the market that day, figured that I was in the clear. Sarah was always the more outspoken of the two, and kinda threatened to tell my father that I was skipping class, if they couldn't be involved in our outings. I should have told them to get lost, but that's where it started, and Robbie liked having them around. It was fine for the most part, we got along, and I started taking an interest in Sarah. You could tell Hannah felt left out in that way. Well, we ended up at a vintage shop right outside of town the one day. The girls were looking at clothes, while Robbie and I were over in the books section, looking for occult books. Robbie was really into occult stuff. We were in the religion philosophy section. I don't know, I was trying to see what called to me, when I ended up finding the 6th and 7th book of Moses. I'd heard of it before. It was like an urban legend among the community, the book of old Dutch magic. It was even the original German grimoire version, full of incantations, seals, spells to heal or damn. and the summoning of spirits to do your bidding. I suppose it was a bad omen to begin with. I'm not proud of this, but I swiped it. There was only so much cash between us, and I felt like we needed it. I needed to know if these things were real. Yeah, we'd mess with the Ouija board together a handful of times. Drive out to the local cemetery and light some candles. It was really stupid. We didn't know what we were doing. Not that I believed in that stuff at the time anyways. The last time we talked to the board, Hannah started acting really strange. Stranger than usual. She was always kinda odd. I thought her bizarre behavior that night maybe was her way of getting Robbie's attention. She clearly had a crush on him, even though the feeling wasn't mutual. As Halloween approached, we decided that instead of trick-or-treating, which we found out eventually that we were too old for that anyways, so instead we talked about a seance, when it was suggested that if we really wanted to push the limits, we should summon a spirit to do our bidding. It was supposed to be fun for the most part, but I think we all had a healthy fear of what if. We each had a role in performing the ritual, so we took turns borrowing the book. Everything was going as planned leading up to that night, until Rebecca demanded to be included on that Halloween night. My sister was a year younger. She'd snuck out with us a handful of times here and there, mostly when we'd go bowling. But on that Halloween night, I went to sneak out through the window over the mudroom. It was a low enough drop that you could just jump down. While on that particular night, she had come out into the hallway. I really didn't want her to tag along, especially with Hannah's jealousy. We eased down the window and cut through the tree line that connected to the main road, where the cornfield started. We'd meet up with Robbie, where he'd just wait past the intersection with his lights off. The Yoder property was a little up a ways. We'd have to park and trek through the rough cornfield to get to the back end of the barn. The slightly ajar barn door was edged in a warm candlelight halo glow. The faint smell of charred peppery pine wafted from inside. Carefully opening the door, you could sense the tension when we walked in. Hannah's smile dissipated when she saw Rebecca. You could feel her eyes asking why Rebecca was there as she stared at her outfit, Rebecca having put on some of the clothes they had stored in Robbie's trunk. There was a brief verbal argument between her, Robbie, and Rebecca. We tried to tell them to keep their voices down. Eventually things settled, and we continued. The open space in the center of the barn had been lined in pink salt, the inside smudged with charcoal of bizarre glyphs, their symbols dotted with flickering handmade candles. "We made the ritual for 4, Hannah said sharply as she withdrew the handwritten seals from a wooden box. On handmade swatches of pulp paper were these intricate, bicolor circles filled with precise spiraling script, overlapped in a deep red. I don't know where she got it, but you could tell that wasn't ink. Looking back, I could sense a dark presence when Hannah handed me my incantation. There was this overwhelming darkness about her. I thought maybe I was just afraid with going through with it, but actually, I think I could sense that there was something already there. I didn't know until later that she'd already performed a ritual, and that she needed us as sacrifices.